Welcome. This is another segment of Senior Living in Alexandria. We've got a special treat for you today and for a couple additional segments, particularly for the summer of 2014. We're going to focus on Finance for Seniors 101, and we're very privileged through this series to have Mark Fries, who is Vice President at Merrill Lynch in terms of special needs in the elder care group, and he's joined by his colleague Michelle Cooper. And today we're going to talk about estate planning for seniors. I know that sounds like an exciting topic for you all, but this is important information, and I think it's something that we all can learn from. So let's do a little bit of overview on what you're going to be covering tonight. Well, first let's get a little bit of background. Tell me a little bit about the group that you work with, special needs and elder care. That's an interesting, what's your mission, or what do you do, or what are you setting out to do?
Well, the mission of the program is to be able to help people that fall in two categories. So elder care would obviously be helping people that are older, and special needs would be helping people that have special needs. It could be as much as autism or Down syndrome, or it could be something just like an elder person also would have special needs too. So I think the term would to deal with both of those types of people.
I think that's a sensitive characterization, that I think there's the finding special talent and knowledge to cover a special group of people is a pretty interesting idea for an organization. Good for you. Let's get started. The first question we have for you is, it says here in terms of qualified assets, tell us a little bit in estate planning, what kind of assets are we talking about that people might have that they, and therefore we'll go into how they might be treated.
Sure. Well, most people that work for a company and they had a 401k, or they participate in IRA programs, or maybe the Roth IRA. So those would all be considered qualified assets. So they have special tax treatments where most of those assets are deferred from taxes for a long period of time.
Okay.
And what a lot of people don't know is that particular asset passes kind of outside of your will. So those directions are going to pass through what's called a beneficiary designation. So if you work for a company at some point, you probably had to fill it out when you went to the HR department, and they had you put down who you wanted the money to go to. So those beneficiary designations are really important, that they're done correctly and that they're following all of your wishes.
So during your working life, you have, obviously you get a salary, but in addition to that are probably things you know about but maybe don't pay particular attention to, maybe don't know the law or how to have access to them or whatever, and those would be qualified assets. So things like 401ks, 403bs, Roth IRAs, et cetera, a whole category of
Correct.
things. And so those are what qualified assets are.
Correct.
And what part of your services is to help people understand those and what particular things. And then you mentioned beneficiary. Is that an area that, why is that an area of concern?
Well, let's say you're a typical family, and so you have a husband and wife, you have a couple kids. And so I always call it I love you designation, so the money's going to go to your spouse and back and forth. So that's usually pretty straightforward. But your kids may not be. So let's say one of your kids has a spendthrift issue, is not good with money, and the other child does great with money. Well, you may have different ways that you're going to put the language in that particular document. It's because they're going to be treated differently. And that asset base inside the qualified account is probably your most powerful asset because it's deferred from taxes for all that time. So you have this ability to keep the IRS away from it for many, many years. So in a qualified plan, like an IRA as an example, or a 401k, the money passes directly between both spouses, but when it passes to the next generation, to the kids, there's some different rules. And so how the rules are, and the IRS rules, is that when you're age 70 and a half, you're required by law to take money out of these retirement accounts.
Okay.
So between a husband and a wife, you can automatically take them out. Between a kid, it's going to be based upon the child's life expectancy. When it's an adult, it's based upon the adult's life expectancy.
What happens if you don't designate a beneficiary?
That's a good question.
Bad things happen?
Bad things happen.
Oh,
yeah.
Good. Let's hear the good news about bad things.
Bad things happen because the state is going to make the determination where that goes. Or in some cases, it may go through your estate. And if you don't have a will, then the estate's going to make the determination where it goes. So having the proper designations, having them all coordinated. So if you have an IRA, you were at one job and you had an account there, and you move to another job and you have an account there, we need to make sure all those are coordinated and say the same thing based upon what your wishes are.
And so it compounds. That's what happens in ordinary circumstances. Be sure you know who the beneficiaries are, primary, secondary, you mentioned. But then when you get into special needs, then seems like you escalate it to a whole different level of concern. What are the issues related to special needs and elder care?
Yeah, sure. I mean, basically in most documents, you have a simple designation that says, okay, here's my primary beneficiary, it's my spouse.
Right.
And maybe you put a secondary beneficiary down, hopefully you did, and that might be both of your kids. But if one of your kids has a special need, then you might have to put additional language in there. So it may say, as an example, in that particular account, that that child only is allowed to take out a certain amount of money, or that particular child is only allowed to be taken out a certain amount of money at age 40, and then maybe more at 45, and more at 50. Or you may say, I want the money to be there for them for the rest of their life, so I'm going to allow them only to take out the money that's required by law to be taken out, which they have to do. If their parent was over the age 7 and a half, was taking distribution, and the kid inherits that asset, then the child continues to have to make those distributions.
My understanding is in a will, a lot of what you're saying sounds like you could put into a will, except that. So you could say, you know, the typical TV series where Uncle Will dies and he gives it to the reprobate son-in-law or something.
Right.
And we're familiar with that. But in this case, don't you have to have a little extra care, a little consideration, and it's not just it's not in the will, but it's in terms of that particular class of qualified assets we talked about, that you need to be particularly careful. If you're going to set rules on the distribution of those funds, you need to think that through carefully. Does that make sound like what?
Exactly. And I think that what happens in most cases, hopefully you've done a will. So 70% of Americans haven't done a will. So that's the first step. So when you've done that will, you've probably...
Do your will.
You've probably put some words in there that said, hey, you know, I wanted this to happen with my son Johnny, I want this to happen for my daughter Jane. So you've done that in your will, but your retirement assets pass outside of your will. So it's very important that those particular designations in that beneficiary form mirror along what you put in your will.
So if 70% of people don't have wills, I suspect some proportion of that has not even thought through what to do about the so-called qualified assets outside of that.
Correct.
So it can be a real problem.
Correct.
And as you mentioned, bad things can happen if you don't do that.
Right.
What about special needs? What sorts of issues or sensitivities, or I'm curious, further question in terms of, you all have to deal with those situations, and therefore you're doing, frankly, a little bit of family counseling.
Right.
And that's not just finance and tax and law and hard, rigid rules, but an awful lot of how do you do that? And Michelle, jump in on any of this.
Thank you, Jim. The way that we typically do this is to really listen to our clients and have them talk about their families and the unique situation that each of their children are in. And we try to make sure that our plan in the beneficiary designation follows the uniqueness of that family, whether it's an age restriction for the kids on when they can pull out money from an IRA, or whether it's in a will or a trust, that they can only take a certain amount of income or principal out for their lifetimes. So it really depends on each particular family and setting things up properly.
Don't you have to deal with a variety of family situations as well? I mean, sometimes families are not as intact as one would like, and
every family, no matter how normal they appear or seem, has certain issues that they would like to have addressed in their estate plan. So it's really about communicating with them and listening and designing an estate plan that's going to give them peace of mind.
How do you, as a professional, you're not technically person counselors or psychoanalysts or whatever, how do you personally learn to do that? Is it part of your organization? Is it part of your ethic? Is it something personal to you? How do you learn about family situations and how to deal with them? That seems like that might be a little beyond your calling.
Well, after doing this for so many years, you come across so many situations, and so it's not only the school training that you've had, but the years of experience and the different things that you've seen where you can guide families. You can't make decisions for them, but you can certainly make suggestions and give them worst-case scenarios if they were to do nothing.
What if I came to you, I became a client, and I had a son who was a spendthrift. He's not financially responsible, and I'm trying to provide for him. I don't want to overwhelm him. I don't want to sustain him. I'd like him to become an independent adult, if possible. What kinds of techniques or ideas, or what's your experience on something like that?
Well, with an individual like that, you want to make sure that they'll be taken care of with some amount of money for the rest of their lives, but also encourage them to be independent, functioning members of society. So one way we do that is to put age restrictions and limits on what they can take, but also to incorporate incentive provisions so that if they were to work, the IRA or the trust would pay them a certain amount extra to match, say, a salary that they were making.
Okay, okay, good. So there are extra provisions that you can add for your beneficiary designations? Are there some bells and whistles to help you tailor it to specific needs that you've discerned?
There are, and I'll give you a good example. So let's say you're a married couple and they both passed away, and the money's now going out to their child. So their child is married, and maybe the marriage is good or maybe it isn't, but their child has grandchildren, so they have grandchildren. So in a lot of cases, they want to make sure the grandchildren get their original money.
Okay.
So we call that bloodline. And so a lot of people feel very strongly about that. So that needs to be done in the language that you originally draw up for your wills and your IRA and your 401k and things like that. So that's a good case where you want to make sure it's okay. And even if it's with if they're married, your kids are married, you want to make sure that the other spouse couldn't take the money away, take it outside of their family.
Okay. And then distribution to MRD, I'm not familiar with it.
So MRD stands for Mandatory Required Distribution.
Oh, okay.
So at age, I talked earlier about age 7.5, you're required by law to take a certain amount of money out, and that's based upon your life expectancy. And so when you pass away and it goes to your spouse, she just takes the money out the same way. But when it goes to your kids, it's very special. That's why we spend so much time on this type of money, because it's been deferred from taxes. And instead of having to take it out over the lifetime of the parent, it's now taken over the lifetime of the child.
Oh.
So it stretches the benefit out over many, many more years.
That could be, rather than say 15, 20 years, it could be 30, 40, 50
it could.
years. And a whole different calculation of that amount based on that.
And
that's interesting.
It could save them in an IRA. Let's say an IRA that happens to be $200,000 or $300,000. It could be a $200,000 or $300,000 difference in tax deferral. So it's a big benefit.
I suspect seniors don't understand mandatory required distribution. I suspect their children know nothing about it unless they've had the hypothetical, let's sit down and talk about our will kind of conversation. That people seem to resist that somehow. And it's probably not good planning, but I think that's what happens.
Well, in our practice, we call them family style meetings. So if the parents are willing to sit down with their kids, I think it's an excellent thing to do and kind of plan it all out. And in that meeting, we're going to talk about their assets. We're going to talk, as long as they're open with talking to their kids about it, what they want to have happen, when it's going to happen. And they may put down some ideas on paper for their child. So they may say, well, I worked my entire lifetime to save this money in my 401k. I want to make sure that it's there for you. So I put some language in there to make sure you have a safety net. So for the rest of your life, there's going to be an asset that's going to be producing income for you that you can use to supplement your salary.
Okay. There's aspects of this that sound like a trust, but in a much simpler form. You don't have the legal structure of a trust, but yet you're still defining rules for future generations, your children, their children. What's a stretch in an IRA? What is that?
Yeah, the stretch is when as we talked about, is when it stretches the benefit over a much longer period of time. So in the mandatory required distribution, for a child, is going to be a lot longer because they're a lot younger. And so it could be for a child, it could even be for a grandchild. And so sometimes you may have your children are totally financially able to support themselves, so you may want to skip that generation. And you want to maybe go to your grandchildren. Obviously, if you have a grandchild that's really young, they have a much longer life expectancy, so that money stays tax deferred for a much longer period of time. Is
there a particular form or format that you should follow, or is there a variety of formats? Michelle, maybe you would mention.
Yeah. So depending on where you house your IRA, that institution will have a beneficiary form.
Okay.
And the most plain vanilla type is a primary beneficiary and a contingent where you list an individual. So if you want to get a little bit fancier, you want to ask the institution if they have the availability of making it a little more customized so that you can leave it to a spouse, but you might put marital restrictions. If for some reason there's a second marriage and you want to make sure that your IRA assets go to your children from your first marriage, you can put a marital restriction on a spouse. If it goes to the contingent beneficiaries and they are your children and you want to put age restrictions, or you want to make sure it goes to grandkids if one of your children passes away, that would be more of a customized beneficiary designation or a trustee sort of IRA.
Okay. And how, if somebody wanted to use your professional services, how do they, what's the best way to use the kind of financial assistance, knowledge and financial assistance you provide? How do you work with somebody like yourself? I came in and I'm a client, or maybe I don't even know to do that. What are your suggestions on how to work with, how do clients work with you?
We really look at it, as Mark said, in a holistic approach. And it's not just about retirement assets or just about your overall net worth. It's about how your assets are titled, what your goals are for your family, what your worries are for yourself, whether it's making sure you have enough cash flow. So it's sitting down with a client and talking to them about what they want to have happen while they're living, and if they pass away, what they want to have written down for their family. And once we understand that, we can segregate the different assets and make sure that the will is prepared properly and the IRA beneficiary designations are as customized as they should be. So it's really an overall big picture approach.
Sounds like you need to do exactly what you said, but it occurs to me in addition to that, there's going to be changes in tax law, there's going to be changes in their investment portfolio, changes obviously in their family. So therefore, they're going to be engaged with you for a fairly long duration, because you have to move with their family changes and alert them to the external changes, laws, et cetera. And so it seems to me that there's got to be a huge amount of knowledge conveyed, but also a considerable amount of trust in the relationship. They've come to rely on you.
That's very true. And one of the things that people fail to do is to look at their estate plan every 3 to 5 years or when they have a major life event.
Okay.
Most people will take the paper that they got from the attorney and put it in their file cabinet and go on their merry way. But the reality is you really have to look at this every few years to make sure it still fits your situation.
Well, I think that's extremely valuable to help people know what some of the pitfalls, but what some of the solutions are. And we do look forward to next month's presentation. I think, if I remember right, we're going to talk, everybody likes to talk about taxes. You're going to help us understand what to do about taxes for seniors and how that relates. But really do appreciate your presentation on estate planning and your knowledge and being able to share it with us
Thanks
today.
for having us.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Mary Ann Beatty. I'm here with Chef Hans from Inova Alexandria Hospital. Welcome
Thank you,
to our
Mary Ann.
program.
Welcome back.
You are a hit. Our seniors love you.
Great,
I just wanted to let you know that. So we're going to cook another yummy recipe, but before we get started on that, I think the last time we talked, we were talking about the hospital's commitment to sustainability and fresh foods for the patients while they're here. Can you tell us what's any new news?
Sure. Well, right now we're using 100% sustainable seafood. We're using organically raised eggs, organically raised meats and poultry, and we're trying to buy as much produce as we can, locally raised produce. By that I mean we're casting a rather broad net around 100 miles, but around where we are. But we try and buy as much local as we possibly can and keep our menus seasonal.
Oh, that's great. And now that we're in the summer months, I think, you know, the foods, local foods are probably plentiful, so it's not you can get a lot of great
we're getting a lot of great peppers locally right now, a lot of cucumbers, a lot of lettuces are grown very fresh, so all that stuff's looking really great. And of course, berries are coming in strong right now also.
Oh, great, yum. So tell us what you're going to cook for us today.
Yep. Well, today we're going to make something a little bit differently. I wanted to make something from a name like Hans, I needed something with a strudel name to it. So I figured we'd make a savory strudel. So we're going to make a spinach strudel with feta cheese, and we're going to serve it with a roasted pepper and beluga lentil relish.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
And it's really easy to put together, so hopefully everybody at home could try it one night and let me know how it comes out.
All righty, well, let's get started.
Sure. So to start with, first thing we do, we start off with some onions and a little bit of garlic in a saute pan. I just already started cooking the onions and the garlic a little bit. And you want to cook them just until their onions are translucent, just till they sweat a little bit and they cook out a little bit. And once they're cooked like that, then we add a little bit of salt and pepper. Again, a pinch of salt and a pinch of pepper. And then we start adding our spinach to it, just a little bit at a time. And the spinach, all we want to do with the spinach is wilt it so it's cooked down. We don't want to cook it to where it's, like that cream spinach look, but we just want to wilt the spinach down all the way. And it'll cook down pretty quick, and it actually almost turns into nothing. Just give it a good saute.
I know you buy all this spinach, and then when you cook it, it does kind of shrink in your...
Right. My wife always says, "Why are you buying all that produce?" And then I come home and I cook it, and then she says, "Oh, now I understand."
Yes.
So as you can see, this is really as far as you want to cook it down right now. It's basically wilted. As it sits, it'll wilt a little bit more. And then we're going to let it cool down before we actually roll it into the strudel.
Okay.
So once we start making the spinach strudel, we take our phyllo dough, and you might all recall that phyllo is a very, very thin pastry sheet, usually originated in the Middle East, around Greece. And you can see how paper thin these sheets are. They're actually two sheets here, but it's really paper thin. So we lay it on a clean napkin, and we're going to spritz it with a little bit of olive oil. Traditional recipes would have you brushing it with butter, and if you want to at home, you can do that, but we try to be a little bit on the healthier side. So I'm going to put another layer of strudel, and each layer gets a little spritz of oil. And what the oil is going to do, that's going to create a barrier between each sheet so that they'll crisp up independently and separately.
Oh,
so I've got about 4 layers there with a spritz between each one. See how beautiful that looks? And when you got it at this point, you don't want to press it down. That little bit of air helps keep it nice and crispy. Now I've got the spinach filling that I already made. You recall it was a saute with some onions and a little bit of garlic. And I'm just going to put a layer of that along the back 2/3 of the strudel dough. Not too much, just enough to get it, and trying to go out all the way to the edges.
That looks pretty. Is this one of your favorite recipes?
I make this at home all the time. It's great. It's great with mushrooms inside and with chicken. There's all kinds of things you can put inside. So here we're also going to put a little bit of feta cheese. I'm going to crumble just bits of feta cheese in there. Just all the way around, and you don't need to get really crazy with how much you put in there. If you like a lot of feta, then by all means add a lot.
Go for it, huh?
Yep. And different cheeses work very well too. Creamy cheeses, like a Boursin works well in there, or a cream cheese would work well in there also. So once I have the strudel laid out and filled, then I take my napkin and I can fold it over just a little bit to get the first seam. And then just using the napkin, I press it down and I roll it all the way. Just keep rolling it all the way through till it's rolled all the way. And there we have a perfect strudel. So once we have the strudel like that, we spritz a pan, put the strudel inside, make another one if you want, got 2, spritz it with a little oil, and then they're beautiful to go in the oven, just like that. They take about 8 to 10 minutes in a 350 degree oven. When the strudel's finished, once it comes out of the oven, they're this beautiful golden brown color.
Isn't that pretty?
And they're really nice and crunchy and flaky inside.
Oh, yeah.
So what we'll do to serve our strudel, we'll take a plate. I have a little bit of our relish we already made. which is a lentil relish and roasted peppers. So a little bit of roasted peppers and beluga lentils.
Uh-huh.
And with the strudel and the serrated knife, we simply cut it in half for one portion.
Uh-huh.
We cut another bias cut.
Oh, that's lovely.
And then we have a simple strudel dish that can be made in about 20 minutes, and it's great to serve with company.
Oh, I love that. Well, let's taste, shall we?
Of course, of course.
Okay.
I'm going to cut a piece off here for you.
Okay. That just looks lovely, and it's light, and it's colorful, and
I've got some spoons here.
yes. Oh, that's really good. Yum. Oh, yummy. Oh, this is a perfect summer dinner for company, or just if you want to treat yourself.
Exactly. And with that beluga lentil and roasted pepper relish, it's a great contrast to go with it. And it's a really healthy vegetarian dish that's great all year round.
Well, thank you very much. And all of Chef Han's recipes will be found on the Senior Services website, www.seniorservicesalex.org. Thanks again, and happy eating. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you so much.
That's very nice.
I represent Talking Books. Now we do digital. So essentially, it's one book per cartridge. Brought a cartridge. And although it's kind of small for you to see from the back of the room, it's a thumb drive in a big plastic box with a little loop in it to make it easy to get in and out of the player. There's only one way to put it in and one way to take it out. The exception to that rule is if you download things onto your own thumb drive. The player will not only take our books, but it has a port on the side that you're not going to be able to see from back there that allows you to put your own thumb drives in there. So if you are web savvy and listen to podcasts, you can save a podcast onto a thumb drive and it'll play those as well. You have play, you have stop, forward and back. Essentially the way the books work is you can navigate them with forward and back buttons. A cartridge can have more than one book on it if I download it for you, or you download one at home, so you don't have to worry about storage so much, and you can bounce from book to book. My service is largely a by mail service. If you want to come and see me at the library, that's fine. You can come with requests, we'll check the stacks, get you what you want, get it checked out, and send you home with it. But most of what we do is by mail, so as long as you get your doctor's note or other certification on your application, you never even have to come and see me.